Brianna burst through the sliding doors of Emory Hospital with Dylan clutched tight against her chest. His small arm dangled at an angle no mother ever wants to see, and his cries echoed down the hallway like a plea she couldn't quiet. Her breath came in sharp, trembling bursts as she called out for help. A nurse rushed forward. "Ma'am, come with me. We'll get a pediatric specialist right now." Brianna followed, heart hammering against her ribs, praying under her breath. Dylan whimpered and held onto her shirt with his uninjured hand, his tears soaking into the fabric. She kissed his forehead again and again. "Mommy's here. I've got you. Stay with me, baby." The nurse stepped aside to call for the doctor on duty. Brianna turned toward the doorway and stopped cold. A man walked in wearing scrubs and a white coat. Confident stride, blue eyes that once held her heart, the last face she ever expected to see again. Clifford. Her past, her heartbreak, her son's doctor. Time didn't pause. She did. Her knees weakened. Her grip on Dylan tightened. Her mind scrambled for sense, for words, for anything that could explain why the very person she had spent years trying to forget was suddenly standing in front of her. At the worst moment of her life, Clifford's steps slowed. His gaze shifted from Brianna to Dylan. Dylan's blue eyes, shining through tears. Eyes Clifford knew far too well. His voice came out low, shaken, almost afraid of its own question. "Brianna, is he?" She couldn't speak. Her throat closed. Her heartbeat roared in her ears, louder than the alarms sounding down the hall. The truth pressed between them like a weight neither could move. She held Dylan a little closer. Clifford took a breath that barely held steady. And just like that, the past she ran from stepped straight into her present. Her son's life was in danger. Her heart wasn't ready for this. But she had no choice. Have you ever tried escaping a past that suddenly found you again at the exact moment you weren't ready for it? Have you ever been forced to lean on the one person who once broke you? Because right now, Brianna must decide whether to trust the man who walked away years ago, or lose precious time that Dylan doesn't have. Will this reunion heal old wounds, or reopen scars she prayed would stay buried? Before we continue, please do me one favor. Like this video and drop a comment so YouTube can share this story with more people who need today's message. And if you're new here, welcome to Mr. Michael Stories. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Welcome back to Mr. Michael Stories, where life's toughest moments reveal life's strongest lessons. Here, we explore real journeys of family, forgiveness, and the choices that shape us. If you're new here, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button so you never miss a story. Clifford pushed open the staff entrance door of Emory Hospital with the familiarity of someone who had walked the same hall for years. The morning shift had barely begun, yet the building was already alive with motion. Nurses rolling computer carts, attending physicians discussing overnight cases, and the faint hum of families settling into waiting room chairs. For Clifford, this was a second home. He stepped inside with a quiet confidence, the kind shaped not by arrogance, but by years of showing up for frightened parents and hurting children. He glanced at the day's patient list on his tablet. A mix of the usual: coughs, high fevers, sports mishaps, allergic reactions. But pediatrics was rarely routine. Children brought unpredictability into every corner of the hospital. A toddler might refuse a simple examination because of a colorful sticker on the nurse's badge, or a preteen might panic over a needle the size of a sewing pin. Clifford knew these rhythms well. He walked into his exam room and reviewed supplies. He checked the otoscope, made sure the tongue depressors were stocked, and ensured the emergency kit had been updated from last night's shift. He tapped into muscle memory, not because he didn't care, but because he cared enough to make sure nothing was ever out of place. Just as he set his tablet down, the nurse poked her head through the doorway. "Morning, Clifford. You're early as always," she teased. "Morning, Tanya. Kids don't wait for schedule changes," he replied with a small grin. She laughed softly, then added, "We've got a little guy with a nasty cough. Parents think it's flu, but it might be asthma. You good to see them? Send them in." He put on a fresh pair of gloves and greeted the family warmly the moment they entered. "Hey there," he said, kneeling down to the child's level. "What's your name?" "Marcus," the boy said weakly. "Marcus," Clifford repeated with a gentle nod. "You look like somebody who's pretty brave. Let's make sure we help you breathe better today." Though the boy was scared, Clifford's easy manner softened the tension in the room. Parents who walked in tight-shouldered left visibly relieved. Children who clung fearfully to their mother's arms eased into his presence. Clifford spoke their language: patience, calm, humor, reassurance. He didn't treat illness alone, he treated fear. But even as he moved efficiently through each case, doing what he loved most, something deeper tugged at him, a quiet current moving beneath the surface, one he never allowed to rise fully because he knew where it led. When Clifford finally stepped into his office for a break, he shut the door and exhaled, giving himself a moment to breathe. The fluorescent light cast a soft glow over the framed certificates on the wall and the small shelf lined with stuffed animals donated by grateful patients. His office was neat, functional, predictable. Everything had its place. Yet the room always felt empty. He sat down at his desk and let his eyes drift to the framed photo pinned to his bulletin board, a picture from last month's hospital charity event. Dozens of children stood gathered in colorful outfits, holding balloon animals, with Clifford kneeling beside them, smiling. It was a beautiful photo, one he kept to remind himself why his job mattered. But as he looked at it now, a familiar ache surfaced. He healed children every day. He comforted parents every day. He showed up for families every day. But he had no family of his own. Sometimes, after a long shift, he found himself lingering by the hospital entrance, watching parents carry their sleepy children to the car. A father buckling his daughter into a booster seat. A mother holding her son's hand and whispering something that made him laugh. Those moments always stirred something in him, a quiet longing that grew stronger with each passing year. He wasn't lonely for lack of people. He had co-workers, neighbors, acquaintances, but none of them filled the specific emptiness that lived in the corner of his heart. The part that wished he had someone waiting for him at home. The part that dreamed of a child with a drowsy smile greeting him at the door. He pressed his thumb gently against his temple, trying to dismiss the heaviness. Yet the thought stayed. A man can spend his life helping children and still go home to silence. Clifford had made peace with that once. He just didn't realize how temporary that peace was. A soft knock pulled Clifford from his thoughts. A nurse peeked in, asking him to review a lab chart. He thanked her, signed the papers, and she left as quickly as she came. Silence fell again. Clifford rubbed the back of his neck and leaned back in his chair. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small keychain. Worn, metal, shaped like a tiny musical note. He brushed his thumb over it slowly. It had been given to him years ago. 5 years to be exact, by Brianna. She bought it for him after he attended her church choir concert. He had jokingly told her he couldn't sing to save his life, and she laughed, saying, "You don't have to sing. Just don't forget the music in your life." But he forgot something more important, her. He sat with the keychain in hand, feeling the weight of memories he tried to bury beneath medical charts and hospital routines. He remembered her smile, the way she brightened a room without trying. He remembered how her presence made even the hardest days feel lighter. He remembered the warmth of her hand in his, and he remembered letting fear push him out of her life. He closed the drawer abruptly, as if shutting away the regret too. But regret doesn't disappear just because a drawer closes. Clifford's upbringing had always shaped how he navigated the world, even when he tried to break free of it. He grew up in a quiet Georgia suburb where lawns were trimmed with precision, neighborhood cookouts were a yearly ritual, and everyone knew which families belonged to which church. His parents were kind but structured. Rules mattered. Stability mattered more. Unpredictability was treated like a problem that needed fixing. They lived in a place where differences were acknowledged but rarely embraced. People stayed in their own circles, their own comfort zones. Clifford didn't realize how much this shaped him until he met Brianna, a woman whose life was filled with community, warmth, diversity, and movement. Being with her had challenged everything he thought he understood. She lived with vibrancy. He lived with caution. She welcomed new experiences. He thought them through too long. She loved openly. He struggled to believe love wouldn't collapse under the weight of expectation. His childhood taught him to seek the safest route. Brianna taught him to live. But back then, fear won. Later, during his lunch break, Clifford sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, pushing food around his plate more than eating it. Conversations buzzed around him, nurses comparing weekend plans, doctors discussing upcoming conferences, families gathering at tables near the windows. But he felt separate from it all. Not because he couldn't relate, but because something inside him had never fully connected to anything outside his work. He had colleagues who joked with him daily, neighbors who waved as he left for work, and patients who trusted him deeply, but none of those relationships filled the hollow space he pretended not to feel. Every night, after long hours of laughter, tears, and reassurance, he returned to silence. Every morning he woke up to a quiet apartment and a neatly made bed that never looked slept in on the other side. He was successful. Everyone said so. He was respected. He knew that. But he wasn't whole. Not in the way he once hoped to be. And although he didn't admit it aloud, he knew exactly when that fracture began, the day he walked away from the woman he never stopped thinking about. As he clocked back in for his next patient, unaware of what the next hours would bring, Clifford carried on with the same steady determination. He did not know that destiny was already moving, silently, steadily, across Atlanta, and that before the day ended, his routine would be shattered by the last person he expected to walk back into his life. The city stretched awake beneath the soft glow of sunrise, each corner humming with its own quiet beginnings. Atlanta moved in its usual rhythm, traffic lights preparing for the rush, coffee shops opening their doors, sidewalks waiting to be filled. Somewhere in the middle of all that life, two very different mornings unfolded at the same time. On one side of town, Brianna stood in her kitchen, pouring orange juice into a small cup, while Dylan sat on the counter swinging his legs. He hummed a tune he made up on the spot, his cast-free arms waving excitedly as he told her about a dream he had, something about racing clouds and winning a prize shaped like pancakes. She laughed softly, brushing crumbs off his pajamas, before setting breakfast on the table. Her morning was full, not chaotic, but lively. Her home carried warmth, from the gospel music playing low on the radio to the frying pan sizzling with turkey bacon. Every sound blended into a familiar sense of family, a rhythm she and Dylan had created together. Across the city, Clifford stood in front of his bathroom mirror, buttoning the last button on his blue dress shirt. His morning was quieter, almost still. He brewed coffee the same way every day, checked his phone for patient updates, and set out items he needed for the hospital shift. His apartment felt organized, controlled, peaceful, but empty. No child humming in the next room, no laughter bouncing off the walls. Just routine. Yet at the same moment that Brianna was tying Dylan's shoes, Clifford was slipping his stethoscope into his coat pocket. 2 mornings unfolding separately, unaware that by the afternoon, they would no longer move independently, but side by side. Destiny didn't announce itself. It didn't warn either of them. It simply aligned their paths, ready for the moment when morning routines would collide into something neither expected, and neither prepared for. As Brianna walked back into her bedroom to grab her work bag, a familiar tug pulled at her memory. She passed by the small wooden clock on her dresser, the one she bought years ago when she first moved in. It used to hang in her old apartment, back when Clifford still visited. She paused for only a moment, fingers brushing lightly against the edge before pulling away. She didn't think about him often. She trained herself not to. Life forced her forward, and she poured everything into raising Dylan, teaching, and staying grounded in faith and community. But every once in a while something small, a song, a piece of decor, the faint scent of cologne drifting in a crowd, brought a whisper of the past back to her consciousness. It never stayed long, but it never disappeared either. Meanwhile, Clifford slipped into his living room to grab his medical bag. On his side table sat a stack of hospital notes, a leftover dinner container, and, tucked almost out of sight, a tiny metal keychain shaped like a musical note. He didn't look at it long, but he looked. He picked it up without meaning to, thumb tracing the worn edges. Brianna had given it to him the night she invited him to her choir rehearsal. She told him it reminded her of him. Steady, reliable, even if he didn't believe he belonged in a world filled with music and harmony. He placed it down quickly, as if touching it too long might unravel a part of him he had fought to keep intact. Neither Brianna nor Clifford woke up expecting their past to follow them into the afternoon. But the signs were there, quiet, lingering reminders of an unfinished chapter neither dared reopen. "Mommy, look," Dylan announced proudly from the doorway, arms stretched wide as if presenting a magic trick. Brianna turned, only to find Dylan wearing his little backpack upside down. The straps crossed awkwardly across his chest, the zipper resting at the bottom. He grinned as though he'd invented a new fashion trend, his bright blue eyes filled with joy and mischief. She couldn't help laughing. Baby, your books are going to fall out like that. No, they won't, he argued confidently. I'm strong. Strong doesn't keep books from falling out, she playfully replied, kneeling to fix the backpack. Turn around. As she adjusted the straps, Dylan began making funny faces at their reflection in the hallway mirror, puffing his cheeks, crossing his eyes, sticking out his tongue. Brianna shook her head, warmth stretching through her chest. He was her light, her balance, her joy in every morning struggle. He hopped off the last step of the stairway, landing with a dramatic superhero pose. I saved the day, Mommy. Did you now? She asked, eyebrows raised. Yes, he said with absolute certainty, because I brushed my teeth super fast. His innocence wrapped itself around the room like a soft blanket, pure, unfiltered life. He didn't know the weight Brianna carried. He didn't know the story behind the eyes that watched him grow every day. He only knew love, and breakfast, and songs he made up, and the world, in his gaze, was simple and full of wonder. A wonder that would unknowingly lead two adults to face truths they weren't ready for. Before stepping out the door, Brianna double-checked everything they needed: Dylan's jacket, the dish she prepared for her friend's barbecue, a spare snack pack, and her keys. She wasn't planning to stay long at the barbecue, just long enough to show up, greet everyone, and let Dylan play with the other children. Her friends expected her. Her choir director teased her last week for always rushing off early. Girl, you move faster than the music, the director joked. Brianna smiled at the memory as she packed the final container, a simple pasta salad she made because time was limited. She placed the lid on gently and slid the dish into a bag near the door. Mommy, are we going now? Dylan asked, bouncing on his toes. Yes, baby. Let's get you buckled before we're late. She locked the door behind them, guiding Dylan down the hallway and toward the parking lot. She had a full day ahead, doctor appointment, barbecue, errands, but she felt steady. Prepared. Life wasn't always easy, but she managed it well. She had no idea how quickly her organized afternoon would unravel, not in chaos, but in revelation. Everything she thought she had under control. Everything she believed was settled. Everything she buried 5 years ago. As Brianna lifted Dylan into his car seat, a strange shift brushed against her chest, a subtle heaviness she couldn't explain. She paused, one hand gently adjusting the seatbelt strap while the other steadied herself on the doorframe. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anything bad. Just something, a feeling of change. She tried to shake it off. Long day, she whispered to herself, taking a deep breath. Across Atlanta, Clifford stood beside his car in the hospital parking garage, sipping his coffee as he mentally prepared for his rounds. A similar pull tugged at him, faint, quiet, but present. He rubbed his thumb against the side of his cup, staring into the distance for a moment without knowing why. Life moves quietly before it moves loudly. It gives hints before it reveals its hand. Neither Clifford nor Brianna recognized the shift fully, but destiny was already arranging the pieces. In just a few hours, a single fall, a common childhood mishap, would change the course of their lives, and connect them again in a way neither expected, but both had unknowingly been walking toward since sunrise. The day was moving. The threads were tightening. Life was aligning two paths that had once been one. The barbecue was already lively when Brianna arrived with Dylan tucked under her arm like he was the most precious gift she could ever carry. People greeted her with warm smiles, nods, and cheerful waves. Music drifted from a portable speaker, blending with the laughter of children running across the grass. The air smelled of smoked ribs, grilled corn, and sweet iced tea. Brianna, her friend called from the picnic table. You made it. And look at Dylan. He's getting taller every time I see him. Dylan waved proudly, showing off his backpack and giving a dramatic superhero pose that earned a burst of laughter. She set down her dish, making sure Dylan had room to play in the open yard. Parents stood along the edges chatting while kids darted in and out like colorful birds, their energy unstoppable. Mommy, can I go play on the steps? Dylan asked, pointing toward the small wooden deck leading up to the house. Stay where I can see you, Brianna reminded gently, smoothing the back of his shirt before letting him run off. For a moment, she relaxed. She allowed herself to enjoy the sunshine hitting her skin, the hum of conversation around her, the peaceful rhythm of a day that felt, finally, uncomplicated. But peace has a way of changing quickly. She glanced over her shoulder to check on Dylan. He was hopping down the steps with the confidence of a much older child, narrating his own imaginary adventure under his breath. Brianna smiled, turning back toward the table. Then the sound hit. A sharp slip. A hollow thud. A gasp that froze her heart. She whipped her head around just in time to see Dylan tumble down the last 2 stairs. His little body twisted awkwardly before hitting the grass, and he let out a cry unlike anything she had ever heard from him. A cry that went straight through her chest. Dylan. Brianna sprinted before anyone else even processed what had happened. She dropped to her knees, scooping him into her arms. He clutched his arm tightly, face scrunched in pain, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. "My arm, Mommy. My arm," he whimpered. She forced herself not to panic, though panic clawed at her like a trapped animal. "It's okay, baby, I'm here," she whispered, voice trembling as she inspected his arm. The moment her eyes reached the slight, unnatural bend near his wrist, her heart sank. Not a sprain, not a bruise. Something was wrong. Badly wrong. The noise around her faded, the music, the chatter, the children's laughter. All of it went silent as Brianna's mind locked onto one thing: getting Dylan help. Her hands shook as she stood up with him in her arms, his cries breaking her into pieces. Parents rushed over, asking questions, offering help, but Brianna could barely form words. "I need to get him to the hospital," she choked out. "Someone grabbed the keys from my bag." One of the women hurried to the table while Brianna held Dylan close. His tears soaked the collar of her shirt, his little body trembling against hers. "You're okay," she whispered shakily against his hair. "Mommy's got you." Fear tried to take over, fear of the unknown, fear of what she would hear from a doctor, fear that she had somehow failed in keeping her son safe. But she pushed it down. She couldn't afford fear right now. When her keys were placed in her hand, she rushed toward her car, securing Dylan in his booster seat as gently as possible. Every time she touched his injured arm, he winced, which made her heart twist even tighter. "Mommy, it hurts," he sobbed. "I know, baby. I know. We're going to the doctor right now." Her voice cracked, but she held firm. She had to. As soon as she started the engine, something inside her shifted, a mode she hadn't felt in years. Pure, fierce, motherly determination, the kind of instinct her own mother once described as the strength God gives you in the worst moments. She backed out of the parking space faster than she ever had, gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her heart pounded, but her mind sharpened. "Talk to me, sweetheart," she said, glancing back through the mirror. "Are you breathing okay?" He nodded through his tears, clutching his arm as if it were slipping away from him. "Does your tummy hurt? Your head?" "No, just my arm." "Okay, that's good, baby. We're almost there." She wasn't soothing herself. She was anchoring him, grounding him, keeping him present so he wouldn't panic more than he already was. Her protective instincts silenced everything else. The guilt, the fear, the memory of how happy the day had been just minutes ago. None of that mattered now. Only her son. Only getting him help. Only making sure his pain ended as quickly as possible. She pulled onto the main road, her breath shallow but controlled. She whispered small prayers under her breath. Not dramatic, just raw pleas from a mother desperate for her child's safety. Please let him be okay. Please. Please let him be okay. Of all days, Atlanta traffic decided to show up in full force. As she approached the intersection near the highway, Brianna felt her stomach tighten. The cars were crawling, inching forward as if unaware that her child was in pain in the back seat. "Please move," she muttered under her breath. "Please just move." The stoplight ahead shifted from red to green, but no one accelerated fast enough for her liking. She gripped the wheel tighter, checking the rearview mirror where Dylan breathed unevenly, trying to stop himself from crying. Every honking horn made him flinch. Every delay made Brianna's pulse spike. People in Atlanta knew this kind of traffic all too well. Clusters of cars trapped between lights, sudden construction zones with no warning, impatient drivers weaving through narrow lanes. On normal days, she tolerated it with a sigh and a playlist. Today, it felt like a cruel test. She flipped on her hazard lights, hoping others would understand the emergency. Some drivers shifted aside. Some didn't. "Hang on, baby," "We're almost there," she whispered again. Her voice was thin, stretched with fear she refused to let him hear. When she finally turned into the street leading to Emory Hospital, she exhaled roughly, though her body remained tense. The building stood tall ahead of her, solid, familiar, a refuge she desperately needed right now. "Mommy, are we there?" Dylan asked, his voice so small it nearly broke her. "Yes, baby. We're here." She didn't stop the car fully before unbuckling her seatbelt. The moment Brianna parked, she flung open her door and raced around the car, her shoes slapping against the pavement. The air smelled faintly of rain, asphalt, and hospital sterilizer drifting from the sliding doors ahead. She unfastened Dylan's seatbelt carefully, lifting him into her arms. His tears soaked through her shirt, his breath shaky against her neck. His cast-free wrist hung limp, swelling more visibly now. The sliding doors parted in front of them with a sharp whoosh. Bright lights spilled onto the sidewalk. Cold air wrapped around them. Voices echoed, doctors calling out instructions, nurses discussing charts, patients murmuring in pain. "Help!" Brianna called, her voice cracking. "Please, someone help." A nurse at the triage desk immediately rushed over, her eyes widening as she took in Dylan's condition. "What happened?" "He fell, on the steps, his arm. He's in so much pain." "Come with me," the nurse instructed, already guiding them through the hallway. The hospital smelled faintly of disinfectant and freshly mopped floors. Children cried in distant rooms, monitors beeped steadily, and a stretcher rolled past them with a soft rumble. Dylan curled into Brianna's chest, shivering slightly. Brianna rocked him instinctively, whispering, I'm here, Mommy's right here." Her breaths came fast and shallow, but she didn't stop moving, not for a second. She followed the nurse into a treatment room where the lights were dimmer, the air quieter. "Sit with him," the nurse said gently. "We're calling for a pediatric specialist." Brianna held Dylan on her lap, kissing his forehead, trying to steady her racing heart. If she had known who would walk through that door next, if she had known how this moment would alter her entire life, she might have braced herself, but she didn't. The air shifted, footsteps approached, and the story moved toward a collision she never saw coming. The triage room felt colder than the hallway, the kind of cold that settled into Brianna's arms as she held Dylan close. He whimpered softly, his face buried against her shoulder, while she gently rocked him. The nurse had placed a small blanket across his lap and positioned a rolling monitor beside the bed. "Someone will be in shortly," the nurse assured her before slipping out. The door clicked shut. Brianna exhaled shakily, brushing her thumb across Dylan's forehead. She whispered soft words to him, the same way she did during storms or when he couldn't sleep. But her voice shook, betraying just how terrified she truly was. The quiet didn't last long. Footsteps approached, steady, decisive, professional, not rushed like a trauma response, not casual like a nurse making rounds. These footsteps carried the confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Brianna looked toward the doorway, expecting a stranger, a doctor she could trust with her son. The door opened. Instead of a stranger, a familiar outline stepped inside. Tall, blue-eyed, the same presence she once leaned on and cried over. Clifford walked into the room. His white coat moved with each step, but for the first time since she'd met him years ago, he looked completely unprepared for what he was walking into. He glanced at the chart in his hand, then lifted his eyes to greet the patient. His gaze froze. So did he. So did she. The air broke. For a moment, Brianna thought the pain in her chest was a panic attack, but it wasn't. It was something deeper, something tied to memories she never wanted to relive. Her entire body locked. Her breath stopped. Her fingers tightened around Dylan's small back. She couldn't speak, couldn't blink, couldn't even look away. It felt as though the room had pulled her back in time, to late nights filled with whispered promises, to days when she believed love could conquer anything, to the moment everything shattered and he walked away without looking back. 5 years had passed, but in this instant, every memory returned with frightening clarity. Clifford's chest rose as if he'd been punched. He dropped the chart slightly, then caught it again, but his grip trembled for a split second, the only visible sign of how deeply the moment struck him. Neither moved, neither breathed, neither spoke. It was as if fate had dragged them both into this collision and locked the doors. Clifford swallowed hard, the tension thickening in his throat. He had prepared for countless emergencies, broken bones, seizures, allergic reactions, but nothing prepared him for this. There she was, Brianna, the woman whose absence he felt every time he walked into an empty apartment. The woman he hadn't allowed himself to search for, out of guilt, out of cowardice, out of the fear that she had moved on without him. He blinked, trying to steady himself, but his eyes drifted back to Dylan's small form curled into her chest. His breathing shifted. All at once, his medical training and his personal past collided violently inside him. He wanted to rush forward and check Dylan, but a part of him didn't trust himself to move. He felt like someone had reached into his ribcage and gripped his heart, pulling it in two directions. The atmosphere in the room thickened, heavy with everything they never said, everything they never resolved, everything that still lingered quietly between them. Brianna's heartbeat pounded in her ears so loudly she could barely hear Dylan's small sobs. She fought to steady her breath, to stay present, to keep her emotions contained. But how could she, when the man she once loved, deeply, hopelessly, was suddenly standing a few feet away, and holding the title of the doctor her son desperately needed? Their eyes met, fully, clearly, unmistakably. 5 years vanished. In their place was a long, echoing silence filled with the weight of questions no one had asked, apologies never spoken, and wounds barely healed. Brianna felt her throat tighten. Clifford's eyes softened with something she couldn't name: regret, shock, longing, fear. 5 years ago, those eyes looked at her with warmth. Now they looked at her as if he had seen a ghost wearing the face of someone he once held close. He took a slow step forward. "Brianna," he whispered, breath thin, voice unsteady. She flinched. Her instinct was to turn away, but she couldn't. Not when Dylan still needed her. Not when running would make everything worse. Not when emotions she long buried rose like a tide she couldn't hold back. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She broke their eye contact first, not out of rejection, out of survival. Clifford forced himself to breathe. Slowly, quietly. He needed to focus. He needed to be her son's doctor. He needed to be composed. But inside, he was unraveling. Why is she here? How is she here? Why didn't I know? How did I let her go? Questions circled his mind like a storm. He tried to push away personal thoughts, reminding himself, the child needs you. The child comes first. Stay focused. But then he saw the boy's eyes. Bright blue. Clear. So familiar. A chill moved through him. No. He couldn't let his thoughts go there. Not yet. Not without facts. Not without understanding the full truth. His chest tightened as panic crept into him, not from fear of treating the injury, but from the sudden possibility that his past might not be as distant as he thought. He took another step forward, this time forcing professionalism to override emotion. "Let me take a look at him," he said softly, though his voice lacked the smooth confidence he typically carried. He felt unsteady, raw, exposed in ways he wasn't trained for. "Mommy," Dylan whimpered, shifting slightly in her arms. Brianna snapped back into focus. She lifted his cast-free hand, holding it gently against her chest. "I'm right here, baby. You're okay. Mommy's not going anywhere," she whispered, her voice shaking despite her effort to control it. She didn't want Clifford to hear the tremble. She didn't want him to know he still affected her. She didn't want her past emotions to show through the cracks her strength barely managed to hold together. But Dylan was hurting, and his pain mattered more than her pride, more than her wounds, more than the history standing only a few steps away. Clifford approached cautiously, giving her space, lowering himself to avoid towering over them. "Hi, buddy," he said gently, shifting into his familiar pediatric tone, soft, calm, soothing. "Can I take a look at your arm?" Dylan sniffled and angled himself carefully, still clinging to Brianna. "Let him check it," Brianna murmured, kissing his cheek. "He's here to help." Her words were for Dylan. Her resolve was for herself. She would not fall apart. Not here. Not now. She would be the mother Dylan needed, even if her heart felt like it had cracked open again. Clifford lifted Dylan's arm with steady hands, though Brianna didn't miss the slight tremor in his fingertips. He examined the limb carefully, murmuring small reassurances to the boy. Dylan flinched but didn't pull away. Clifford worked with quiet precision, but his eyes occasionally flicked to Brianna, seeing her struggle, seeing her pain, seeing everything they never addressed, and the truth settled between them. This wasn't just an emergency room visit. This was the beginning of everything they had been avoiding for 5 years. Clifford inhaled slowly, pressing the pad of his thumb against the back of his glove to steady himself before approaching Dylan. Professionalism anchored him. It had to. Everything else inside him felt like shifting ground. He positioned himself at the side of the exam table, lowering his posture so Dylan wouldn't feel overshadowed by an adult figure towering above him. Kids responded better when the world didn't seem so big around them. Today, that mattered more than ever. "Hey buddy," Clifford said gently, his tone soft and steady, the same tone he used on frightened toddlers who needed calm more than medicine. "I'm going to take a closer look at your arm, okay? I'll be as gentle as possible." Dylan sniffed, his little voice thin. "Is it gonna hurt?" "It might feel a little weird," Clifford answered honestly, "but I'll tell you everything I'm doing, and I won't surprise you. How does that sound?" Dylan hesitated, then gave the smallest nod, the kind a child gives only when they feel safe enough to trust. Clifford slowly touched the lower part of the boy's arm, careful not to apply pressure. His hands moved with extreme precision, not rushed, not hesitant. He watched Dylan's reactions more than he watched the injury itself, noting every flinch, every breath, every brief tightening of muscles that told him exactly where the pain lived. "Good job," Clifford murmured. "You're doing great." Brianna sat behind Dylan, her arms wrapped protectively around him, her cheek pressed against the top of his head. She didn't speak, but her eyes followed Clifford's every move. Her expression held a complicated blend of fear and gratitude. Fear for her son and gratitude that someone was finally helping him. But underneath all of that was something else she didn't dare name. Clifford's voice remained even, calm, and steady. Warmth without pressure, confidence without arrogance. There were no jokes, no flashy distractions, no forced cheerfulness. Just careful, gentle care. The kind of care that didn't need to be performed because it was simply who he was at his core. In that moment, nothing about Clifford's past mattered. Not the heartbreak, not the silence, not the years lost. Right now, he was the doctor her child needed, and he rose to that responsibility with a quiet strength that made the room feel just a little less frightening. When Clifford finished the first part of the assessment, he stepped back to prepare the portable X-ray unit. Dylan leaned into Brianna, his tears slowing but not entirely gone. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice shaky. "Yes, baby?" she murmured, smoothing his curls gently. "Is he a good doctor?" Brianna swallowed hard. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Of all the questions her son could have asked, that was the one that pierced her the most. She brushed her thumb across his cheek. "Yes, baby. He's a very good doctor." Dylan blinked slowly, turning his gaze to Clifford, who was adjusting the screen on the machine. "Do you fix lots of kids?" He asked him directly, not with suspicion, but with genuine curiosity only a child possesses. Clifford gave him a small smile. "Every day. Do they cry like me?" "Sometimes," Clifford replied. "But they're brave. Just like you." Dylan nodded, as if receiving an important badge of honor. "And, will my arm be okay?" Dylan whispered. Clifford paused for barely half a second, long enough to make sure he spoke with confidence, not assumption. "Yes," he said softly. "Your arm will be okay. We're going to help it heal." Dylan exhaled shakily, his posture relaxing just a little. His innocence didn't erase the pain, but it softened the atmosphere. It introduced something pure into a moment that felt heavy and complicated for the adults in the room. He didn't see history. He didn't see unspoken questions. He didn't see the emotional storm sitting between two people who once shared a life. He only saw the man helping him. And the mother holding him, nothing more. As Clifford positioned the X-ray panel beside Dylan's arm, a silent battle raged inside him, one he kept locked behind steady hands and a calm expression. His mind kept flicking back and forth between two worlds, the doctor who had to remain composed, the man who was cracking internally. Every time he touched Dylan's arm, something pulled in him, a tight, unfamiliar ache, something he hadn't felt in years, something he didn't know how to interpret without breaking his own focus. Is he mine? Could he be mine? Why didn't she tell me? Did she think I wouldn't care? He crushed those thoughts as quickly as they appeared. This wasn't the moment for speculation. The boy needed stability, not emotional chaos. Across the room, Brianna fought her own internal war. She watched Clifford with an expression that masked more than it revealed, but her eyes had depth, conflict, and a softness she didn't want to acknowledge. Seeing him again hurt. Seeing him again helping her son hurt even more. But seeing him again as the father her heart once imagined for her child, that hurt in a way she wasn't prepared for. She kept her voice calm for Dylan, but inside, a storm brewed. Why now? Why here? Why after all these years? Why does he have to be the one treating my baby? Two people trapped in the same small room, both trying to hold themselves together, both failing in quiet, invisible ways. The X-ray image loaded on the screen beside him. Clifford leaned in slightly, pointing out the small fracture, explaining the next steps in simple, clear terms. But as he talked, Dylan shifted slightly, lifting his face toward the light. The overhead lamp illuminated his eyes, bright, unmistakably blue. Clifford froze mid-sentence, just half a breath. Barely noticeable, but Brianna caught it. His pupils tightened, his lips parted slightly. A flicker of realization, or fear, flashed across his expression. He tried to cover it instantly, clearing his throat and returning to the explanation. But the moment had already happened. A truth he hadn't dared consider earlier now pressed harder, refusing to be ignored. Those eyes, those exact blue eyes. He had seen them before. In the mirror, in old family photos, in the genetic line he carried forward. It wasn't proof, but it was a possibility strong enough to unsettle him deeply. Clifford looked up at her slowly, quietly, searchingly. "Brianna," he began, his voice low, almost cautious. His eyes. Her breath hitched. She straightened abruptly, her spine stiff, her jaw tightening in a way he recognized, the way she used to brace herself, before shutting down a conversation she wasn't ready for. "We're not doing this right now," she said gently but firmly. "Please, just help my son." Her eyes glistened with a mix of pain and exhaustion, but her tone held no anger. It held boundaries, clear ones. Clifford nodded slowly, accepting the wall she built between them. But the unanswered question lingered in the air, heavy, undeniable, impossible to push aside now that it had taken root. While Clifford stepped out momentarily to grab casting materials, Brianna held Dylan close, rocking him gently. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door, her thoughts spinning faster than her heartbeat. If you're watching this moment unfold, please take just 1 second to like this video and leave a comment. It helps more people find this story and keeps this channel growing. And if you're new here, welcome to Mr. Michael's Stories. Go ahead and subscribe so you never miss a chapter of these powerful life lessons. Brianna exhaled slowly, pressing a kiss to Dylan's forehead. Little did she know, the next few days would bring answers she had avoided for years. The waiting room outside the imaging area had grown quieter since the morning rush. A few people sat scattered across rows of chairs, scrolling through phones, whispering to children, or leaning back with tired eyes. The walls hummed softly with the rhythm of overhead vents, and the faint smell of antiseptic clung to the air. Brianna stepped out of the treatment room for a brief moment while the nurse checked Dylan's blood pressure. She needed air, just a breath, something to steady herself after the emotional hurricane in the triage room. She rubbed her palm over her forehead, trying to ground herself. But when she turned, Clifford was already there. Not in her space, not blocking her path, just there, standing a respectful distance away, his hands resting loosely at his sides, his face caught between worry, regret, and something quieter, something he didn't have the right to express anymore. For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Then he took a careful step closer. "Brianna." His voice came out low, steady, but heavy. "I need to say something." Her chest tightened. She didn't want to hear whatever he had carried for 5 years. Not here, not while Dylan was still hurting. But the sincerity in his eyes made it impossible to walk away. Clifford swallowed, gathering the courage he wished he'd had years ago. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for leaving the way I did. For walking out without giving you the explanation you deserved. For not being the man you needed me to be." His voice broke slightly on the last few words. Brianna held her breath. She wasn't prepared for this. She wasn't prepared for him. Not today. "I should have stayed. I should have fought harder. I should have shown you mattered to me more than my fears," Clifford continued, each sentence feeling heavier than the last. "I can't change what I did, but I am sorry, truly sorry." His apology didn't erase the past, but it cracked something inside her, something she had sealed away the night he left. She blinked slowly, steadying herself before she spoke. "Thank you," she whispered. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, just acknowledgement. And that was enough to make Clifford exhale like he'd been holding his breath for years. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but loaded with meaning neither asked for. Brianna folded her arms across her chest, not in defense, but in protection. Emotions swirled inside her, sharp, confused, tender, angry, relieved, clashing so hard she felt dizzy. "This isn't the time, Clifford," she said softly, shifting her weight. "My son needs me. That's my only focus right now." He nodded instantly. "I know. I'm not trying to be cruel," she added, her voice trembling. "But I can't unpack anything with you right now." "I'm not asking you to," Clifford replied quietly. "I just needed you to hear the truth." She looked away, staring at a vending machine that hummed in the corner of the hall. It took all her strength not to crumble into the confusion rising inside her. Distance wasn't about anger. It was about survival. She had rebuilt her life without him. She had learned how to be strong without expecting anyone to return. She had created a safe world for Dylan, one without uncertainty. Letting Clifford close again, even emotionally, threatened the structure she clung to. So she drew a line, not with cruelty, but with caution. "I appreciate the apology," she said quietly, "but nothing changes right now." Clifford nodded again, accepting her boundaries, even though they sliced across his hope. "You're right," he said gently. "Your son comes first." His tone carried no bitterness, only truth. They stood in silence, surrounded by strangers, yet wrapped in a private tension no one else could understand. Every unspoken truth hovered between them. The truth that they once loved each other fiercely. The truth that their breakup wasn't simple. The truth that the past wasn't finished with either of them. Clifford glanced toward the treatment room door, then back at her. He wanted to ask more, questions that gnawed at him, questions he was almost afraid to hear the answers to. But he didn't. Because she wasn't ready. Because Dylan was hurting. Because the moment demanded restraint, not emotion. Brianna too felt the weight of everything unspoken. She felt it in the way Clifford looked at her, not with entitlement, not with anger, but with a longing wrapped in regret. She hated how her heart recognized that look. She hated that part of her still cared. She hated that the man she tried so hard to forget was now back in the most vulnerable moment of her motherhood. But she also knew this wasn't the time to let those emotions run wild. So she forced her voice into something steady. "We should get back to Dylan." "Yes," Clifford replied immediately, stepping aside to give her space. Yet neither moved. Because something in the air felt unfinished. A conversation that had only begun, a truth waiting just beyond reach, a history refusing to fade quietly. The moment Brianna reached for the treatment room door, her hand froze. A memory hit her, sudden, sharp, uninvited. The last night she saw Clifford. They stood in her old apartment, the kitchen dimly lit by a flickering bulb. She remembered the way her throat burned from holding back tears, how her hands shook as she begged him to tell her what was wrong. "You're shutting me out," she had whispered back then. "Clifford, talk to me. Tell me why you're pulling away." He couldn't meet her eyes. That should have been her first sign. "It's not you," he muttered. "It's me. I'm not ready for this life. For everything you want. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be here." "I don't think I can be the man you need," he said softly. "I don't think I'm enough." She remembered taking a step toward him, reaching for his hand. "You are enough." But he pulled away, and that hurt more than anything he could have said. "I need space," he said finally. And in that moment, the space between them became a goodbye. He walked out, closing the door gently as she slid down the wall and cried into her hands. The flashback faded, but the ache remained. Clifford watched her quietly, recognizing the shift in her expression. He didn't know what memory crossed her mind, but he knew he caused it. And the regret in his eyes softened his entire face. "Brianna," he whispered again, but she held up a hand, not harsh, but firm. "No," she said softly, "not now." Her chest rose and fell with controlled breaths. She wasn't fighting him. She was fighting herself. Between them, love had once been powerful, but fear had been louder. Fear had won then. Fear still lingered now. Fear of being hurt again. Fear of losing control. Fear of letting someone close, only to watch him leave again. Clifford understood that fear. He carried his own. Fear of not measuring up. Fear of the responsibility he once ran from. Fear that the worst decision of his life came too late to repair. But even standing in that hallway, both worn and fragile in their own ways, neither of them could deny that something between them still existed. Not healed, not resolved, not dead, just waiting. She turned the knob to re-enter the room. He stepped aside, giving her the space she needed, even though every fiber of him wanted to reach out, to say more, to fix something he wasn't sure he had the right to fix. But he didn't, because love wanted to move forward, fear wanted to stop time, and both forces lived inside them. Only one would win, and the answer wasn't clear yet. The nurse stepped out to update paperwork, leaving Clifford and Brianna in the small exam room with Dylan resting quietly on the padded bed. His eyes were half closed from exhaustion, but his fingers still clung to Brianna's arm as if letting her go would make the pain return. Clifford stood beside the counter, reviewing the preliminary imaging results on his tablet. His face remained composed, but inside, his entire world was shifting. He kept stealing glances at Dylan, not out of curiosity, not as a doctor evaluating a patient, but as a man staring at a possibility that shook him down to the marrow. Because the more he looked, the more he saw himself. Not just the blue eyes, not just the slight curl of the hair near Dylan's temple, not just the shape of his small nose, but the way Dylan's mouth tilted when he fought not to cry. The same way Clifford did as a child. He watched Dylan breathe softly and felt a strange sting behind his ribs, a mix of hope, fear, and gut-deep responsibility. A responsibility he didn't know he had. A responsibility he didn't know he'd lost. His heartbeat grew heavier. 5 years. 5 years he never checked in, never looked back, never wondered if walking away meant losing more than just Brianna. But now he wondered if he'd walked away from something far bigger. Dylan, a boy who looked at him with trust. A boy who didn't know the storm brewing silently inside him. A boy who might be... Clifford's breath shortened. He lowered his eyes to the floor, gripping the counter so tightly, the muscles in his arm tightened. His mind raced. Is he mine? Did she know? Did she try to tell me? Did she decide I didn't deserve to know? Or was she protecting him from me? He didn't have answers, and the uncertainty was tearing through him like a quiet, relentless wave. Brianna sensed the shift. She always sensed Clifford's internal storms, even when they were together long ago. His silence carried a weight that pulled her attention like a magnet. She turned her head and caught the exact moment Clifford looked at Dylan with something he was trying desperately to hide. Recognition, fear, possibility. Her stomach tightened. No, this wasn't the time. This wasn't the place. This wasn't a conversation she was prepared to have. Not when her son was hurting. Not when her heart was already stretched thin. Not when the wounds Clifford left had only barely begun to scar. She straightened, her emotional guard rising instinctively. As Clifford took a hesitant step toward them, Brianna gently shifted Dylan, as if shielding him, even though she knew Clifford meant no harm. Brianna, he started, voice low, careful, almost pleading. Can I ask? No. Her response came quicker than she intended. Clifford froze. She softened her tone, but her wall stayed firmly in place. I'm not discussing anything beyond my son's care, she said, eyes fixed on Dylan. Not today. Her voice wasn't harsh. It wasn't angry. It was controlled, held together by threads of fear, exhaustion, and the need to protect her child from emotional chaos. She knew the question he wanted to ask. She knew he had seen the resemblance. She knew he had connected the timeline. And she wasn't ready, not emotionally, not mentally, not in this hospital room, to navigate the truth she had locked away for years. So she shut the door on the conversation before it even started. Clifford watched her in stunned silence, realizing she was not just shielding herself. She was shielding Dylan. From him, the thought pierced him deeper than any accusation could. Dylan made a small sound, whimpering as he tried to adjust his position. The movement jerked Clifford back into the moment, back into the role he could handle, the doctor, not the man with questions, not the man drowning in regret, just the doctor. He stepped forward, slow, gentle. "Let me help you adjust your arm, buddy," Clifford said softly. Dylan blinked up at him, eyes glassy but trusting. When Clifford reached out, Dylan's tiny fingers wrapped around his wrist, instinctively, tightly, without hesitation. Clifford froze. The contact, innocent, small but deeply human, sent a wave through him he couldn't explain. Brianna saw it. Her breath caught. Dylan wasn't afraid of Clifford. He didn't pull away. He didn't hide in Brianna's arms. He clung to him, just like a child reaching for someone familiar, someone comforting, someone safe. "Don't go," Dylan whispered, voice breaking. The words hit Clifford with brutal force. It took everything in him not to react visibly, but his eyes softened, and for the first time since he entered the room, he had to turn his head away to steady himself. He didn't deserve that trust. He didn't earn that trust. But he felt it anyway, and it broke him. After the cast was secured, Clifford stepped outside to finalize discharge notes. Brianna thought that would be the end of it, that he would give instructions, wish them well, and slip back into his professional life. But he didn't. Clifford walked back into the room with a small sling and patiently helped adjust it around Dylan's neck. He explained symptoms to watch for, demonstrated how to support the cast properly, and made sure Brianna knew exactly how to help her son through the next few days. But he didn't stop there. He checked in again before they left the hospital. "Text me if the swelling increases. Call me if he can't sleep from the pain. I'll stop by tomorrow evening to check the cast fit." Brianna blinked at him, confused. "You don't have to do that," she murmured. "You've already done more than enough." Clifford shook his head, voice soft but firm. "I want to help, not professionally, not out of obligation." He wanted to show up, something he failed to do years ago. Brianna hesitated, caught between accepting help and guarding her heart. But Dylan settled the matter for her. "Can he come?" he asked, looking between them. And just like that, Clifford became part of their next day. The following evening, he arrived at their apartment with a medical bag slung over his shoulder. He didn't come empty-handed either. He brought a small cooling wrap for pain relief, a book about brave animals to distract Dylan, and a gentle patience Brianna wasn't prepared for. He stayed only a few minutes, then 30, then an hour. Before she realized it, Clifford slipped into their routines the way sunlight slips into a room through blinds. Quiet, gradual, natural. He texted in the mornings. "How's he sleeping? Any discomfort this morning?" He called in the evenings. "Is he eating okay? Any tingling in the fingers?" He showed up when he said he would. Every time. Not to force himself back into Brianna's world, but to be present for Dylan. Brianna watched in silence, unsure whether to be grateful, angry, hopeful, or terrified. Because the truth was, Clifford didn't just slide into Dylan's routine. He slid into hers too. She found herself waiting for his updates, listening for his knock, wondering how long this would last, wondering whether letting him close was a mistake she couldn't reverse. And Clifford, he found something he didn't expect in the quiet moments of helping her family, belonging. One evening, Clifford adjusted the strap of Dylan's sling with steady hands. Brianna watched from the doorway, arms crossed lightly, not defensively, but thoughtfully. Dylan giggled as Clifford made a small, playful sound to distract him. The house felt warmer with Clifford in it, more alive, more balanced. When Clifford finished, he stood up slowly, and his eyes met Brianna's. The air between them shifted, soft, charged, familiar. Not the fiery passion of young love, something gentler, heavier, earned. Their eyes lingered too long. Neither looked away first. Clifford cleared his throat, breaking the moment. I should get going," he murmured. "Yes," Brianna replied softly, though her voice lacked conviction. He stepped toward the door, hesitated, turned back slightly, and Brianna felt something in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not resentment, not confusion. A pull. A quiet, cautious spark. Something like the beginning of a truth she wasn't ready to face. Maybe Clifford wasn't just returning to Dylan's life. Maybe he was returning to hers. The next afternoon brought a soft, warm breeze through the Atlanta neighborhood as cars rolled slowly down the narrow residential street. The sun hung low, casting a mellow glow on the brick apartment buildings. Brianna had just finished reheating some leftover baked chicken when she heard a knock, gentle, but firm enough to be recognizable. Clifford. Her chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from the weight of the unknown. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, took a breath, and opened the door. He stood there wearing casual jeans, a simple navy shirt, and carrying his medical bag. The moment he saw Dylan tucked in his blanket on the couch, Clifford's expression softened. "Hey, buddy," he said with a warm smile. Dylan perked up. "You came back." The excitement in his voice stunned Brianna every time. Dylan didn't get that attached to many people, yet here he was, glowing with joy at the sight of Clifford. "Of course I came back," Clifford replied, kneeling beside the couch. "I promised, didn't I?" Promises. That word made something shift deep in Brianna's chest. She stepped aside to let Clifford enter. He walked in with a mixture of familiarity and nervousness, as if he wasn't sure whether he was welcome beyond his medical role. He glanced around the living room. The soft gray couch, the framed family photos, the scented candle flickering on the side table, taking in the warm lived-in space that reflected Brianna's world. "I'll just check the cast, make sure it's fitting well," Clifford said quietly. Brianna nodded, folding her hands to keep them from fidgeting. She watched as Clifford examined the edges of the cast, gently pressed near Dylan's fingertips, and asked him about the pain level. His movements were careful, thoughtful, and almost tender. And that tenderness didn't go unnoticed. Every time Clifford adjusted the sling or smiled at Dylan, Brianna felt the strange pull of a past she wasn't sure she was ready to revisit. She told herself he was only here for Dylan, but the air between them held more than parental concern. It held familiarity. It held a forgotten warmth. It held memories she had tried to bury. When Clifford finished, he stood and looked at her. "He's healing well. You've been doing everything right." The pride in his tone surprised her. It sounded personal. "Thank you," she whispered. The silence that followed felt thick, full of things they weren't ready to say. After checking the cast, Clifford stayed a few extra minutes at Dylan's request. Minutes turned into half an hour. Eventually, Brianna offered him a plate. "It's just baked chicken," she said lightly, unsure if he would accept. Clifford smiled. "If you made it, I'm sure it's good." He sat at the small dining table, while Brianna reheated an additional portion. The smells of seasoned chicken drifted through the room, and as soon as Clifford took his first bite, his eyes widened. "Wow, this is really good." Brianna tried not to laugh. "It's just chicken, not like any chicken I've had," he said honestly, reaching for another piece. "What seasoning is this?" She smirked. "Secret. So you're not going to tell me?" "Nope." He pointed his fork at her, pretending to be offended. "That's cold, Bri." Hearing the nickname from his mouth again threw her off, and she quickly turned her attention to the stove to hide the reaction on her face. Meanwhile, Dylan giggled from the couch. "You talk funny," he told Clifford. Clifford chuckled. "Funny how?" "You say words like you're in a movie," Dylan replied, swinging his legs playfully. Brianna covered her mouth to hide her laughter. Clifford pressed a hand to his chest dramatically. "Wow." Dragged by a 4-year-old. "You walked into that one," Brianna said from the counter. Their laughter mingled easily, too easily for people who had spent years apart. The cultural differences between them appeared in small, harmless ways. Clifford asked why Brianna kept hot sauce on the table, like it was a permanent resident. She asked how he grew up without ever tasting collard greens. He looked horrified when she mentioned oxtail. She teased him for using measuring cups for everything. Their worlds, once separate, blended together in natural, humorous ways that made the room feel lighter. For a moment, it didn't feel like two adults with a complicated history. It felt like a family finding a rhythm. After dinner, Dylan insisted on showing Clifford his favorite cartoon. Clifford sat beside him on the couch, pretending to follow the plot with exaggerated seriousness. "So let me get this straight," Clifford said, pointing at the screen. "The dog is driving the spaceship, but the cat is the boss?" Dylan nodded proudly. "Yup, that makes no sense." Dylan burst out laughing. "Yes, it does. It absolutely does not. Mommy, he doesn't understand," Dylan shouted through giggles. Brianna shook her head. "Clifford, let the kid have his world." Clifford placed a hand over his heart. I'm just saying, if the cat is the boss, why is the dog flying? That's a workplace safety issue. Even Brianna laughed, despite trying not to. Then came the real comedy. Clifford attempted to help with the dishes. Attempted. He squirted too much soap, creating an overflowing mountain of bubbles. He dropped a plate, thankfully plastic, and splashed water all over the counter. Brianna raised an eyebrow. You good? He stared at the sink in defeat. I save children for a living. Why is this harder? Because this house rejects you, she teased. It definitely does. They both laughed again. But beneath the humor, something deeper stirred, recognition of how naturally he fit into her space, even if he couldn't wash a dish to save his life. As the night settled, Dylan fell asleep on the couch. Clifford carefully lifted him into his arms, supporting the cast as gently as possible. Brianna watched, her heart softening against her will. There was a tenderness in the way Clifford held him, a quiet protectiveness, a natural familiarity. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't performing. He cared. And not just in the medical sense. When Clifford placed Dylan in his bed, he took a moment, just a moment, to adjust the blankets around his small shoulders. He whispered something soothing that Brianna couldn't quite hear, and brushed a stray curl from the boy's forehead. The scene wrapped around her like a warm blanket. She hadn't expected Clifford to be this gentle. She hadn't expected him to connect this quickly. She hadn't expected him to feel like a father, and that realization terrified her. Because if he truly was Dylan's father, then the fragile world she built alone was about to change forever. She wasn't ready. But her heart whispered something she didn't want to admit. Dylan deserved this. He deserved someone who looked at him the way Clifford just did. Someone who showed up. Someone who stayed. Brianna crossed her arms lightly, trying to hold her emotions in place. Clifford stepped out of the bedroom quietly. He's out, he whispered. She nodded twice, unable to form words for a moment. Clifford glanced at her with a soft, almost vulnerable expression. You're doing an incredible job with him, he said. His voice carried sincerity, not flattery. Thank you, she breathed, her eyes lowering. I try. You're doing more than trying, Clifford continued. He's kind. He's brave. He's funny. That all comes from you. Brianna swallowed hard, because the truth was, she didn't do it alone. Not entirely. Part of Dylan came from Clifford, whether Clifford knew it yet or not, and watching them together tonight made that truth impossible to ignore. Clifford took a slow step toward the door, ready to leave. But before he reached it, he paused, hesitating the way a man does when a truth is sitting heavy on his tongue. He turned back to Brianna. Can I ask you something? He said quietly. She stiffened. Depends on what it is. His eyes lowered for a moment, then lifted back to hers, filled with fear, hope, confusion, and a longing he could no longer hide. Brianna, he whispered, voice shaking slightly. Is Dylan mine? Silence hit the room like a sharp breath being held. Not dramatic, not explosive, just soul deep. Brianna froze. Her fingers curled into her palm, her throat tightened. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Clifford watched her reaction, the flicker in her eyes, the way her body went completely still, the breath she didn't release. He already knew the answer, but he needed her to say it. Brianna took a step back, unable to speak. Clifford swallowed hard, hurt and hope warring inside him. You don't have to tell me tonight, he said gently. But please, don't keep shutting me out. He took one more look toward Dylan's room. Then he walked out the door, leaving Brianna standing alone in the quiet apartment, trembling at the weight of a truth she could no longer hide. The days that followed the question Clifford asked, "Is Dylan mine?" were quiet on the surface, but heavy beneath. Brianna avoided answering him, not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear of changing everything. Fear of losing control. Fear of opening wounds she barely survived the first time. But despite the unanswered question, Clifford kept showing up. He never pushed, never cornered her, never demanded anything. Instead, he simply appeared at the times he promised. On Wednesday after school, on Friday evening before sunset, and on Saturday morning just before Dylan's favorite cartoon started. Every time he arrived, Dylan's whole face lit up. Clifford, you came back. He greeted him like someone greeting the sunrise. And Clifford responded with the same warm smile, every single time. I told you I would. A promise is a promise. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't forced. It was steady. They fell into a quiet rhythm, something that looked strangely like the beginnings of a family, though no one dared say the word out loud. Clifford learned Dylan's favorite snacks, his bedtime routine, his habit of asking 10 questions before finishing one, and his contagious giggle when something surprised him. He also learned that Dylan loved being read bedtime stories, but always insisted on turning the pages himself, one tiny hand gripping the book carefully to avoid straining the cast. The more Clifford watched him, the more certain he became. He didn't need DNA to recognize what his heart already knew. He looked at Dylan the way a man looks at a part of himself he didn't know he was missing, and Brianna saw it. Every day, she saw it. One Saturday morning, Brianna invited Clifford to join them at a neighborhood brunch her church group organized. It wasn't formal, just folding tables, grills, music playing from someone's Bluetooth speaker, and kids running around the grassy lot. Clifford tried not to look overwhelmed. He was one of the few white people there, and although everyone was friendly, everything felt unfamiliar to him. The jokes, the music, the inside references. He was learning in real time. At one point, someone handed him a plate stacked with cornbread, macaroni, and collard greens. He stared at it like it was a math problem. Brianna raised a brow, smirking. What? Never had collard greens before? Not like this, he admitted. Like what, Clifford? Seasoned, he said honestly. She burst into laughter. Just eat the greens. He tried a bite. He paused. He blinked. Okay. Wow. That's what I thought. Next came the moment that nearly sent the whole table into laughter. Someone started a line dance. Brianna joined effortlessly, gliding into rhythm like she'd been born moving like that. Clifford tried. He really tried. His feet refused to coordinate. His arms moved half a second late. At one point, he accidentally stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. Dylan laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. Brianna covered her face, laughing uncontrollably. Clifford, what are you doing? I'm participating. He insisted, completely offbeat. That's not participating, that's struggling. But there was no mockery, only joy. Each mistake, each awkward shuffle, each misstep broke down a wall between them. And Clifford kept trying because Brianna was smiling. And she hadn't smiled like that in a long time. Later, while sitting on a blanket near the edge of the field, Brianna handed him a bottle of water. You survived, she teased. Barely, he groaned dramatically. You all move too fast. It's literally the easiest routine. Then why did I look like I was fighting invisible gravity? Because you were, she said, nudging him playfully. The nudge startled him, not physically, but emotionally. It had been years since she initiated a touch like that. Even something that small made the space between them feel charged. Clifford looked at her the way a man looks at someone he cherished once and feared he may never earn another chance with. I missed your laugh, he said quietly. Her smile faded, replaced by something soft but guarded. Clifford, she turned her head away. I know, he said. I'm not asking for anything. I just missed this. Missed you. Her throat tightened. He wasn't manipulating her. He wasn't pushing. He was simply honest. And honesty, coming from him, was both painful and comforting. Let's just focus on today, she whispered. He nodded. Today it is. But the chemistry between them, gentle, warm, familiar, was undeniable. Not rushed, not overwhelming, just present, alive. The following week, Clifford joined Brianna and Dylan for choir practice. He didn't sing. He didn't even try. He simply sat in the back row with Dylan on his lap, swaying with him, while the choir rehearsed. Brianna watched him from across the room and felt something she couldn't name. Something deep and slow and frighteningly hopeful. Clifford couldn't carry a tune, but he clapped along slightly offbeat, earning amused looks from the older choir members. At the end, one woman approached him and patted his shoulder. You look like you tried your best. Clifford nodded solemnly. I did. It wasn't good, but I did. Brianna nearly choked on her water. That weekend, the community hosted a small block party, and Clifford returned, even though no one asked him to. He helped carry tables, set up chairs, and even attempted to grill chicken. Attempted. Smoke billowed everywhere. Children ran away laughing. Adults yelled playfully, "Hey, hey, turn it down." Brianna rushed over, doubled over in laughter. "What are you doing?" "I thought I had it under control." "You burned it. It's well seasoned." "Clifford, no. This chicken is not seeing the light of day." Dylan laughed from the picnic table. "Mommy, he burnt it." "I see that, baby." Clifford threw his hands up. "It's not my fault grills hate me." Despite the chaos, the community grew warmer toward him. Each disastrous attempt made him more familiar, more human, more accepted, because he tried. And for a community that valued effort, sincerity, and heart, that mattered. By the end of the block party, Clifford had somehow become the unofficial assistant of the event, handing out drinks, tying balloons, and giving piggyback rides to kids who treated him like one of their own. People began calling out his name. "Clifford, grab that cooler." "Clifford, help me move this." "Clifford, can you take the picture?" He fit, not effortlessly, but honestly, and Brianna watched it happen. She had braced herself for judgment, from the choir ladies, from her neighbors, from the older folks who had known her since childhood. But instead, she heard supportive comments. "He seems good for Dylan. He looks like he really cares. That man is trying. You picking a good one this time." Even Dylan's godmother walked over, arms crossed playfully. "He's a little awkward," she said, "but he's trying. And trying counts." Trying did count, more than anyone knew, because Clifford wasn't just learning how to fit into Brianna's world. He was learning how to stand beside her again, slowly, respectfully, without assumptions. And the community accepted him not because he was perfect, but because he was genuine. As the evening settled and people started packing up, Brianna walked beside Clifford while Dylan dozed on her shoulder. "You did good today," she said quietly. "Thank you," he replied, brushing soot off his shirt. "I almost set myself on fire, but thank you." She smiled. "You're getting better." He looked at her, heart full. "I'm trying." "I know," she whispered. And she did. For the first time in a long time, she truly did. Because Clifford wasn't just trying to be present, he was trying to belong. Not only in her son's life, but in hers. And without saying a single word about it, a family was forming. Slowly, softly, unexpectedly. The invitation came unexpectedly. Clifford stood in Brianna's doorway one Thursday evening, holding 2 grocery bags with Dylan bouncing excitedly behind him. After checking the cast and sharing a few jokes, Clifford cleared his throat. My parents asked about Dylan," he said quietly. Brianna froze. Her heart reacted before her mind did. "What do you mean they asked about him?" "They noticed I've been spending a lot of time here," he explained carefully. "And they're curious." He hesitated. "They want to meet you. And Dylan." The room fell completely still. Brianna wasn't ready for this. Not emotionally, not practically. Meeting a man's parents wasn't something she took lightly, especially given their history and the unanswered questions between them. But before she could respond, Dylan tugged on her leg. "Mommy, can we go? Please?" His bright eyes sparkled with something that made her chest soften, hope. She looked at Clifford again. He wasn't pushing her. He wasn't assuming. He was simply offering the next step of a journey neither of them fully understood yet. "When?" she asked cautiously. "Saturday afternoon," he replied. "Just a quick visit. Nothing formal. Nothing formal." Yet somehow it felt like everything. After letting the moment settle, Brianna exhaled slowly and nodded. "Okay, we'll go." Clifford blinked, relieved, grateful. "Thank you," he said softly. But the gratitude wasn't only for agreeing to meet his family. It was for giving him a chance he had long believed he'd lost forever. Saturday arrived too quickly. Brianna spent the morning reassuring herself that this wasn't a commitment. This wasn't a relationship label. This wasn't forgiveness. It was simply a visit. Clifford arrived right on time, wearing a button-down shirt that looked ironed with too much care. Dylan ran out excitedly, sling bouncing lightly against his small side. As they approached Clifford's parents' house, a cozy white-painted suburban home with trimmed hedges and a large front porch, Brianna felt her stomach twist. Everything about the neighborhood felt different from her own. The quiet streets, the matching mailboxes, the decorative fall wreaths. Clifford noticed her tension. "You okay?" he whispered. "Just nervous," she admitted. He nodded with understanding. "I promise, they're kind people." Kind didn't erase cultural gaps, or the years of distance in their history. But she squared her shoulders anyway. The door opened before they even knocked. Clifford's mother, a small woman with soft blonde hair pulled into a ponytail, opened her arms immediately. "You must be Brianna," she said with genuine warmth. "And this must be Dylan." Dylan waved nervously. "Hi." Clifford's father appeared behind her, tall like Clifford, but with a firm posture softened by a gentle smile. "Welcome," he said with a nod. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and warm bread. Family photos lined the walls, Clifford as a child, Clifford at graduation, Clifford holding a soccer trophy. A life Brianna was never part of. She felt that deeply. But the awkwardness broke when Clifford's mother suddenly blurted, "Oh, I didn't know what snacks Dylan likes, so I bought everything at the store that looked kid-friendly." She stepped aside to reveal a counter overflowing with snacks. Chips, fruit cups, crackers, cookies, juice boxes, granola bars. Clifford groaned. "Mom, what?" "I wanted him to feel welcome." Dylan gasped dramatically. "Can I have all of it?" Everyone laughed, including Brianna, whose tension eased slightly. Cultural differences showed up quickly. Clifford's father served sweet tea, so light Dylan whispered loudly, "Mommy, where the flavor?" Brianna nearly spit hers out trying not to laugh. Clifford's mom blinked. "Is it too light?" "It's different," Brianna said politely. "Oh, should I add more sugar?" "Mom," Clifford said, holding back laughter, "let's not send him into orbit." Moments like that, awkward, humorous, honest, shaped the afternoon. They weren't perfect. They weren't seamless, but they were real. After a few minutes of shyness, Dylan opened up. He showed them his cast, proudly explaining how he earned it. "I fell on the stairs," he announced. "But guess what? Clifford fixed it." Clifford's father raised an eyebrow with amused approval. "Sounds like he did good work." Dylan continued exploring the house with the unrestrained curiosity only a 4-year-old could carry. He found Clifford's childhood toy chest. He discovered the backyard swing set. He insisted on pushing himself even though one arm was in a sling. Clifford helped gently, steadying the swing with a quiet protectiveness that didn't go unnoticed. Then came the moment that hit Brianna's heart unexpectedly. Dylan stood in front of a framed photo of Clifford as a toddler. Same blue eyes, same cheek structure, same smile. "Mommy," Dylan said softly, pointing. "He looks like me." The room fell silent. Clifford looked at Brianna. She looked away. His mother, noticing the tension, didn't comment. Instead, she simply said, "You both have beautiful eyes." It was said kindly, but the truth beneath it pulsed like an unspoken heartbeat. Dylan bonded especially quickly with Clifford's father. They sat on the porch, counting cars that passed by. Clifford's dad asked gentle questions. "You like drawing? What's your favorite animal? You keeping your mommy busy?" Dylan answered each one with enthusiasm, completely at ease. Brianna watched from the doorway. She wasn't expecting this. Not the ease, not the warmth, not the genuine connection. It felt like watching a small piece of a puzzle fall into place, one she wasn't sure existed until now. After lunch, Clifford's mother insisted on taking a family photo. Something simple, just Dylan in the middle with Clifford and Brianna on either side. Brianna hesitated, unsure if this crossed a boundary, but Dylan jumped into position, grinning, and Clifford gently motioned for her to join. She did. Clifford's mother lifted her phone. "All right," big smiles. The photo captured something fragile and beautiful, Dylan smiling proudly. Clifford leaning slightly toward him. Brianna standing close, eyes soft. A picture that looked like it belonged to a family that had existed for years, not one held together by fear and uncertainty. Later, as they prepared to leave, Clifford's mom hugged Brianna and whispered, "You're welcome here any time." Something warm settled in Brianna's chest. Not pressure, not judgment, acceptance. And acceptance, coming from Clifford's family, meant more than she ever expected. As Clifford drove them home, Dylan fell asleep in the back seat, clutching the stuffed bear Clifford's mom gave him. The car was quiet, but not uncomfortable. The kind of quiet that invites honesty. Clifford stole a glance at Brianna. "Thank you for coming today," he said softly. She nodded. "It went better than I expected. They really like you," he continued. "And they adore Dylan." Brianna looked out the window. "Your parents are sweet," she admitted. "They made us feel welcome." Clifford took a slow breath. Something was building in his chest, pressing upward. "I want to say something. And I'm trying not to make it complicated." Her heartbeat picked up. "Clifford," she began carefully, "we're just trying to figure things out." "I know," he interrupted gently. "I'm not rushing anything. I'm not expecting anything." He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "But today made me realize something." She turned to him. "What?" His voice softened into something raw and honest. "I still care about you, Brianna. More than I ever stopped admitting to myself." She inhaled sharply. "And spending time with Dylan, it makes everything clearer." "What do you mean?" she whispered. He glanced at her again, eyes full of something deep and steady. "I don't know where we go from here," he said softly. "But I know I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you, or him." Silence filled the car, but it wasn't empty. It was thick with questions Brianna wasn't ready to answer, and hopes Clifford wasn't ready to let go of. The evening after visiting Clifford's parents felt heavier than Brianna expected. She thought she would feel relieved. She thought she would feel clarity. Instead, she felt a tangled mix of warmth, fear, tenderness, and confusion. That night, after tucking Dylan into bed, Brianna stepped into the living room to find Clifford still sitting on the couch. He hadn't left yet, even though Dylan was already asleep, even though the night had stretched far longer than he probably intended. He wasn't lingering. He wasn't intruding. He was simply waiting. Not impatiently, not expectantly, just waiting with a quiet heaviness in his shoulders. When Brianna entered the room, Clifford stood slowly, his hands brushing nervously over the seams of his jeans. "Brianna," he said softly, "can we talk for a few minutes?" The tone of his voice made her stomach clench. It wasn't the tone of a man asking for another chance. It wasn't the tone of someone seeking reassurance. It was the tone of someone finally ready to tell a truth that had been suffocating him for years. She nodded, sitting carefully on the armchair across from him. "Okay, I'm listening." Clifford inhaled deeply, then exhaled like he was releasing a weight he'd carried forever. "You deserve to know why I left the way I did," he began quietly. "And not the half-truth I gave you that night." Brianna's breath caught. She had waited years to hear this. Clifford lifted his eyes to hers. "The real reason I disappeared wasn't because I didn't care. It wasn't because I stopped loving you." Brianna felt her heartbeat rise. He continued, voice trembling slightly. "It was because I got scared, terrified, not of commitment, not of you, but of failing you in the same way someone failed me." She frowned, confused. "My father, the one you met today." Clifford paused. "He's not my biological father." The room shifted. Brianna froze. "I didn't find out until I was 20, Clifford continued. "My mom told me after an argument. The man who raised me, he chose to stay. My real father walked away and never came back." His voice cracked on the last word. Brianna couldn't breathe. "I spent years pretending it didn't bother me," he said. "Years telling myself it didn't matter. But the night we argued, when you told me you were thinking about starting a family, something inside me broke." He dropped his face into his hands for a moment, gathering strength. "I panicked," he whispered. "Not because I didn't want a life with you, but because I was terrified I would become the man who abandoned me. I left because I thought I would hurt you by staying." Brianna's chest tightened with a mix of hurt and empathy. "Clifford," she breathed softly. "But I was wrong," he said, lifting his head again. "I didn't spare you pain. I caused it, and I've lived with that guilt every day." He took a step closer, not touching her, not crowding her, just close enough to show vulnerability. "The reason I disappeared was because I didn't believe I deserved you, or any family." Brianna felt her eyes fill before she could stop them. He swallowed. "But seeing Dylan, seeing how he looks at me, how he trusts me," his voice broke again. "It made me realize I ran from something that was never meant to hurt me, something that could have saved me." A tear slipped down Brianna's cheek. He continued quietly. "I left because I didn't know how to be a father." Another pause. I came back because I want to learn. The weight of his confession sank into the room like a stone falling into water. Silent, deep, irreversible. Brianna sat frozen in her chair. Everything she thought she understood about their past, every unanswered question, every painful memory, every night she cried alone, suddenly rearranged into a new shape. Not an excuse, not justification, but a truth she never knew existed. Part of her wanted to scream. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you talk to me before walking away? Another part of her wanted to cry for the hurt he carried alone. Another part, an older, softer part, felt the ache of something else, relief, because he didn't leave due to lack of love. He left from fear. Clifford watched her carefully, respecting the silence she needed. You don't have to say anything, he said gently. You don't owe me forgiveness. I just needed you to know the truth. Brianna pressed her palms against her knees, grounding herself. I don't know how to feel, she whispered. That's okay, Clifford replied softly. Take your time. It hurt, she admitted. You hurt me so deeply, Clifford. His jaw tightened with remorse. I know, and I'm not asking you to erase that. I trusted you, she continued, her voice cracking. I believed in you. I believed in us. And then you vanished. Every word was a small wound reopened. Clifford nodded slowly. I know, and I will spend as long as it takes proving I won't run again. The promise wasn't heroic. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet, fragile, and imperfect. And somehow, that made it feel real. Brianna wiped a tear, but didn't look away. Her heart was torn between the man who broke her, and the man who was now trying to heal the very wound he created. Just then, a soft sound echoed from the hallway. Mommy. Brianna turned. Dylan stood there, sleepy-eyed, hair sticking up, dragging his blanket behind him. My arm hurts, he whimpered. Before she could move, Clifford stepped forward instinctively, slow enough to ask permission with his eyes, but confident enough to show he wasn't running from responsibility. Come here, buddy, Clifford said gently. Dylan walked straight into his arms. The sight hit Brianna like a wave. Clifford lifted him with practiced ease and whispered soothingly, You're okay. I'm right here. Dylan rested his head on Clifford's shoulder, sighing softly as Clifford adjusted the sling with careful hands and rubbed small circles on his back. Brianna watched, heart trembling, not because Clifford was helping, but because Dylan trusted him, because Clifford comforted him naturally, because the moment looked impossibly familiar, like something that should have always been. Clifford turned slightly, his voice soft. Let's get you back to bed. He carried Dylan down the hallway, whispering gentler words than Brianna ever heard from him in the past. And something inside her, something wounded, something uncertain, something afraid, began to soften. Not fully, not suddenly, but undeniably. When Clifford returned, the air between him and Brianna had shifted again, gentler, clearer, but still fragile. He stood near the doorway, unsure whether to stay or leave. Brianna, he said quietly, whatever happens next, I just want to be someone you and Dylan can depend on. Her eyes lowered, full of conflict and hesitant hope. Before either could speak again, Sully's narrator voice enters softly, guiding viewers. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video and leave a comment. It helps YouTube share these powerful stories with more people who need them. And if you're new here, welcome to Mr. Michael Stories. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a journey like this one. Clifford shifted his weight. Should I go? Brianna didn't answer immediately. Her heart knew one truth. Clifford was no longer the man who ran. But her mind whispered another. Could she risk trusting him again? Her silence wasn't rejection. It was fear and hope, a fragile battle unfolding quietly as Clifford waited for her answer. The cliffhanger settles, heavy and emotional. Would she let him stay? Or would she let him walk away again? The apartment was quiet, too quiet, for a moment that heavy. Clifford still stood near the doorway, shoulders tense, waiting for an answer he knew might break him again. Brianna remained seated, staring at the faint glow from Dylan's bedroom down the hall, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. His confession replayed in her mind. I left because I didn't know how to be a father. I came back because I want to learn. For years she had painted Clifford in the colors of abandonment. Now those colors had been rearranged into something far more complicated, shades of fear, trauma, uncertainty, and misguided self-preservation. She didn't know how to feel. But she knew one thing. It was time to stop running from the truth she had kept locked away. Clifford. Her voice was so soft he barely heard it. He turned immediately. Yes? Sit down, she whispered. He obeyed quietly, taking the opposite end of the couch. Not close enough to pressure her, not far enough to seem distant. Just there, steady, present, waiting. Brianna inhaled slowly, grounding herself. When I found out I was pregnant, she began, eyes fixed on the carpet, I was terrified. He didn't interrupt, didn't speak, didn't breathe too loudly. He simply listened. You and I, we were so young, and after you left I tried calling, tried texting, tried reaching out. For weeks, but you were gone. No explanation, no closure. Her voice trembled. I remember sitting in my bathroom staring at the test, shaking. I must have dropped to the floor because I remember the cold tile on my back. Clifford's throat tightened. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. Part of me wanted to hunt you down and force you to face what you had done, but the other part, the stronger part, knew I had to prepare myself to do it alone. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't stop speaking. By the time I accepted the pregnancy, you had disappeared so completely it felt like you never existed. I had to choose between chasing you and protecting the little life growing inside me. Clifford's breath trembled. Brianna, I'm so... She held up her hand. Let me finish. He nodded, swallowing hard. I told myself that one day I might run into you, that one day you might come back. And for the first few months, I hoped for it. I hoped you'd walk through my door. I hoped you'd call. I hoped you'd care. Her voice cracked again. But you didn't. That truth broke something inside Clifford. He leaned forward, hands clasped, eyes lowered. So I made another choice, Brianna said, wiping her face. I decided Dylan would be loved, whether you were in the picture or not. I decided he would grow up knowing stability, joy, community, family. And when he was born, and I saw his eyes. She paused, her voice thickening. I knew he belonged to you. Clifford inhaled sharply, eyes filling. But I also knew I couldn't trust you with that truth. Not then. Not after the way you left. Silence filled the space between them, heavy and raw. For 4 years, she continued softly, I have been a mother and a father. I've carried the weight of your absence. I've answered questions I wasn't ready for. I've watched Dylan look in the mirror and ask why his eyes look like the sky. And every time he asks, I tell myself I did the right thing by keeping him safe. Clifford bowed his head. And maybe, she whispered, voice trembling, I also kept him safe from you. From the version of you I last saw. Her words landed like soft punches, painful but honest. Brianna wiped her cheeks again, took a shaky breath, and finished. I didn't keep him from you out of spite. I kept him from you because I couldn't risk him being abandoned the way I was. Her voice fell into a whisper. That's the truth. Clifford didn't move at first. He sat completely still, absorbing every word like a man absorbing the aftermath of a storm he caused with his own hands. His eyes glistened. His jaw trembled. His breath shook. Then quietly, too quietly, he whispered, I deserve that. His voice cracked. I deserve every bit of pain you just described. I deserve the anger, the hurt, the disappointment. I deserve all of it. He pressed a palm to his forehead, choking back a sob he couldn't hold in. I left at the worst possible time. I didn't just break your heart. I stole years from my own child. Years I can't get back. He looked at her then, eyes red, voice barely holding together. I missed his first steps. Brianna's chest tightened. His voice shook harder. I missed his first words. A tear streamed down his face. I missed birthdays. I missed scraped knees. I missed bedtime stories. I missed everything that mattered. He covered his face with his hands. I don't know how to live with that. Brianna exhaled shakily, not out of relief, but out of the weight of hearing him confront the very pain she had lived with. Clifford lowered his hands slowly. But I'm here now, he whispered. And if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up even a fraction of what I lost. He wasn't just crying. He was breaking. And somehow, so was she. Brianna rose from the chair slowly, her feet carrying her toward him without conscious thought. She sat beside him, not touching him, not closing the space entirely, but sitting near enough for vulnerability to be shared. "I don't know how to forgive you completely," she admitted. Clifford nodded, tears still falling. "I wouldn't expect you to," he whispered. "But," Brianna said softly, "I do believe people can change." Clifford lifted his eyes, searching hers. "And I believe you regret what you did." His voice cracked. "More than anything. And I believe Dylan deserves to know the truth. One day. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but someday." Clifford nodded again, acceptance washing over him. "And maybe," she continued gently, "forgiveness can start with honesty." His breath hitched. "Then let me be honest again," he said quietly. "I never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second, not even when I was too scared to stay." Brianna's eyes filled again, not with anger this time, but with something softer, something she tried to bury, something that refused to die. Hope. A long, quiet moment passed before Brianna finally spoke. "You weren't ready to be a father," she said. "No," Clifford admitted. "But I'm ready now. You weren't ready to stay. I'm ready now. You hurt me." "I know," he whispered, voice breaking. "And I'm sorry. You hurt Dylan, even without knowing it." Clifford winced. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure he never feels that hurt again." Brianna looked away, wiping another tear. "You can't erase the past, Clifford." "I know. But you can shape the future." He nodded, eyes softening with a mixture of gratitude and determination. Then quietly, Brianna whispered the question that lived in her heart. "What do we do now?" Clifford reached out, not touching her, just offering his hand palm up between them. "We build slowly," he said gently. "We take one step at a time, we heal what we can, and we give Dylan the family he deserves. Whatever that looks like for you, for him, for us." The word "us" hung in the air softly, not pushing, not assuming, just hoping. Brianna didn't take his hand, not yet. But she didn't pull away either. And for now, that was enough. The days following their emotional conversation moved more gently than Brianna expected. Nothing dramatic shifted overnight. There were no grand declarations, no rushed decisions, no forced closeness. Instead, the change came in quiet, steady ways that felt safe. Clifford showed up when he said he would. Every time. He texted each morning to check on Dylan. "How's his arm today? Did he sleep okay? Any swelling? Want me to stop by after work?" He never overstepped, never pushed, never assumed. He simply continued to be present. One evening, as Brianna prepared dinner, she heard a knock. She opened the door to find Clifford holding a small bag. "Dylan mentioned he wanted animal stickers for his cast," he explained. "I wasn't sure what kind he likes, so I grabbed a few." He handed her a bag filled with more stickers than any child could reasonably use. Tigers, dinosaurs, little cartoon superheroes, and rockets. Before she could respond, Clifford added, "And I brought some wrap tape too, just to reinforce the edges. I noticed they were fraying a bit." His attention to detail, the way he noticed small things about Dylan, did something to Brianna's heart. Not a dramatic flip, not a romantic surge. Something gentler. Something like trust. Later that evening, Clifford sat cross-legged on the floor, while Dylan pressed stickers all over his cast. "This one is the daddy lion," Dylan announced proudly. Clifford blinked. "Daddy lion?" "Yeah," Dylan said with a grin. "He protects the baby lion." Clifford swallowed, throat tightening. Brianna noticed. The moment passed quietly, but it lingered long after. The moment came unexpectedly, not during a meaningful event, not during a family outing, not during an emotional conversation. It came on a Wednesday afternoon. Brianna had asked Clifford to pick Dylan up from preschool because she had a parent-teacher meeting that ran late. Clifford agreed without hesitation. When he arrived, Dylan burst through the classroom door, his face lighting up like the sun. "Daddy." The word flew out of him naturally, without thought or correction. It wasn't forced. It wasn't coached. It wasn't dramatic. It was instinct. A truth spoken from a child's heart before the adults could catch their breath. Clifford froze in the hallway. The backpack slipped from his hand. The air punched out of his lungs. He stood completely still as the word echoed in his mind. "Daddy." It was the title he had run from. It was the identity he feared. It was the role he believed he didn't deserve. Yet Dylan said it with joy, with trust, with certainty. Clifford crouched slowly and opened his arms. Dylan ran into them without hesitation. Clifford held him tightly, eyes closed, breathing carefully through the overwhelming rush of emotion. "You okay?" one of the preschool teachers whispered kindly. He nodded, though tears gathered quietly at the corners of his eyes. When they returned to Brianna's home later, Clifford stood in the doorway still shaken, not from fear, but from how deeply the moment settled into his heart. "I need to tell you something," he said softly. Brianna turned, concern in her eyes. "What happened?" He swallowed, voice thick. "Dylan, he called me Daddy today." Brianna went completely still, not because she was surprised, but because hearing it out loud made everything real. How did you react?" she asked, her voice fragile. "I froze," Clifford admitted, emotions tightening his throat. "Then I hugged him and said I was there." Brianna pressed a hand to her chest. "I didn't correct him," Clifford added quickly. "I didn't want to confuse him or make him feel wrong. I let him feel whatever he was feeling." Tears welled in Brianna's eyes. "You did the right thing," she whispered. He nodded, still shaken. "That moment..." He paused, voice cracking. "It felt like something I've been missing my entire life." Brianna watched him with a soft, aching understanding, because she saw the truth. It wasn't just Dylan choosing Clifford. It was Clifford choosing Dylan. A few nights later, Brianna found Clifford sitting on her porch steps, while Dylan slept inside. The sky was dim, and the streetlights flickered softly across the quiet neighborhood. "I didn't want to overwhelm you," Clifford said as she stepped outside. "But I needed a minute to breathe." She sat beside him, leaving just enough space between them to feel safe. "You okay?" she asked gently. He nodded, though his voice shook. "I didn't realize how much I wanted this. Until now," he whispered. "Until he said that word." He paused. "It broke me." In the best way, Brianna felt her eyes burn. "I know I can't erase the past," Clifford continued. "I know I can't get back those years I messed up. But, Brianna..." He looked at her fully then, with trembling sincerity. "If you let me, I want to spend the rest of my life being the man both of you deserve." The words hung in the air, soft but powerful. Not a proposal. Not a demand. Just a truth from a man finally ready to love without fear. Brianna breathed in slowly, letting the moment settle. "You're already becoming that man, Clifford," she whispered. He closed his eyes, overwhelmed. They sat in silence, side by side, letting the healing happen slowly, like wounds closing under warm light. Summer arrived in Atlanta with warm evenings and backyard gatherings, and slowly, Clifford became a quiet part of Brianna's community. At block parties, he helped set up tables without being asked. At church events, older women handed him extra plates of food to keep up your strength. Kids begged him to play tag, even though he was terrible at dodging. And everyone noticed something. He was happier. He was lighter. He was exactly where he belonged. One afternoon, Brianna's neighborhood hosted a cookout in the local park. Clifford showed up with Dylan on his shoulders, the little boy waving proudly. "Look, Mommy, I'm tall." "Yes, you are." Brianna laughed. Clifford gently lifted Dylan down. "You ready to eat?" Dylan nodded. "I want the big chicken." Clifford leaned toward Brianna. "He means drumstick. He calls them big chickens." She shook her head, smiling. "You two together are something else." They moved through the cookout like a small, growing family, passing plates, sharing bites, laughing at Dylan's stories. One of the choir ladies approached Brianna quietly. "You look happy," she said. "I am," Brianna replied softly. "And that man?" The woman nodded toward Clifford, who was attempting, and failing, to catch Dylan in a game of tag. "He's trying. For both of you. You can't fake that." Brianna followed the woman's gaze. She watched Clifford stumble on the grass, fall dramatically, and let Dylan defeat him. She watched Dylan run into his arms after the victory. She watched Clifford lift him, spinning gently before placing him safely down. She watched the way Clifford looked at her then, just a glance, quick and subtle, but filled with tenderness. Her heart softened further. Maybe love wasn't supposed to be perfect. Maybe it was supposed to be rebuilt, brick by brick, moment by moment, side by side. Later that evening, after the cookout ended and the sun slipped below the trees, Brianna, Clifford, and Dylan sat together on a blanket in the park. Fireflies flickered in the warm air. The city hummed in the distance. Dylan lay with his head on Clifford's lap, drifting toward sleep. Clifford brushed a hand gently through the boy's hair, an act so natural it made Brianna's chest ache. Clifford looked up at Brianna, his expression soft but full of meaning. "I know we're not ready for big steps," he said quietly. "I know we're rebuilding slowly, carefully, and I'm okay with that." She nodded, listening. "But there's something I want you to know," he continued, voice trembling slightly. "I'm not going anywhere, not this time, not ever again. Whatever future you're willing to build with me, however fast or slow, I'm here. Fully." He took her hand gently, not gripping, not pulling, just holding with quiet reverence. "I choose you, Brianna," he whispered. "And I choose Dylan, every day. For the rest of my life." Her breath caught. It wasn't a proposal, but it carried the weight of one. It carried the promise of effort, commitment, and permanence, without the pressure. Brianna squeezed his hand back, tears gathering. "I choose you too," she whispered. "Just stay this time." He nodded firmly. "I will." And for the first time in years, Brianna believed him. The evening after the cookout felt like a gentle closing chapter on a long and painful book. Not an ending, but the final line before a new story began. Brianna stood on her balcony, overlooking the quiet Atlanta street. The warm night breeze lifted the edges of her hair, and the soft glow from street lamps washed over the neighborhood like a protective blanket. Inside, Dylan slept peacefully, curled around his stuffed animal. Clifford sat beside him earlier, reading a story in a low, soothing voice. He didn't leave until Dylan's breathing fell into that steady rhythm unique to deep childhood sleep. As Clifford walked out of the bedroom and closed the door softly, he saw Brianna standing outside. He stepped onto the balcony, careful not to intrude but close enough to share the moment. "You okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded slowly. "Just thinking." "About what?" She took a breath and looked up at the sky. "About how much life can change," she said. "How one accident, one moment, one choice can turn everything upside down." Clifford stepped beside her, leaning on the railing. "Or right side up," he added gently. She glanced at him. He continued, "If that day in the hospital never happened, I never would have seen Dylan. I never would have seen you. I never would have had a second chance." A soft silence settled between them. The city hummed in the distance. A car rolled down the street. A dog barked faintly from another block. Everything was ordinary, yet everything in their world had transformed. Brianna breathed deeply, finally allowing the moment to feel real. "I'm glad you're here, Clifford." He turned to her, a slow smile forming, not wide, not rushed, but warm and full of gratitude. "I'm glad I'm here too," he said. The wind brushed past them. The night held its breath. And in that stillness, a new chapter formed quietly around them. They stayed on the balcony for several minutes, not speaking, just sharing the same view, the same air, the same quiet. Then Clifford said softly, "You know, I used to think life was about getting everything right the first time, about being perfect." Brianna let out a small, humorless laugh. "I think a lot of us grow up believing that. But it's not true," Clifford continued. "Life is forgiving. People are forgiving. Second chances exist, not because we deserve them, but because they're part of how we grow." She nodded slowly. "I learned something too," Brianna said. "That strength isn't doing everything alone. Strength is allowing people in when the time is right. Strength is knowing when someone is truly trying." She looked at him thoughtfully. "You came back differently, not the same man who left, not the same man I cried over. You came back with honesty, and that matters." Clifford swallowed, emotion tightening quietly in his throat. They stood together in quiet understanding. Then Brianna added, "And Dylan, he deserves to grow up seeing forgiveness in action, not the kind that erases the past, but the kind that teaches him how to move forward." Clifford nodded. "I want to be part of that." "You are," she whispered. Over the next few weeks, their family rhythm settled into something beautifully balanced. Clifford helped pack Dylan's lunch each morning, though he used too many napkins, which made Brianna laugh. Brianna handled bedtime stories most nights, though Dylan insisted Clifford do the voices because Clifford's lion voice made him laugh until he hiccuped. They shared grocery runs, playground visits, movie nights, and lazy Saturdays, where Dylan fell asleep between them on the couch. They weren't rushing anything. They weren't forcing labels. They were simply living, with intention, love, and openness. And every time Clifford held Dylan's small hand as they crossed the street, and every time Dylan rested his head on Clifford's shoulder, and every time Brianna caught Clifford watching her with a quiet, grateful tenderness, she realized something beautifully simple. This was a family. Their family, one built through pain, repaired through truth, and held together by choice. One evening, Brianna and Clifford took Dylan to Piedmont Park. The sunset painted the sky in orange and pink streaks as children played tag on the grass and couples strolled along the walking path. Dylan ran ahead, laughing as he tried to chase his shadow. His cast had been removed earlier that week, and his arm was healing well. Clifford watched him with a proud, relieved smile. "Hey, buddy," Clifford called out. "Be careful. I'm fast," Dylan yelled back. "He gets that from you," Clifford teased. Brianna laughed lightly. "I don't know where he gets half his energy." They continued walking until Dylan suddenly stopped beside the lake. The reflection of the sky shimmered across the water, catching his attention. "Mommy, Clifford," Dylan said softly. They stepped closer. "What is it, baby?" Brianna asked. Dylan turned, his curls glowing in the evening light. "Are we a family now?" The question froze both adults in place. Dylan wasn't crying. He wasn't confused. He wasn't asking for reassurance. He was asking for truth. Brianna looked at Clifford. Clifford looked at Brianna. And without any hesitation, without fear, without doubt, Clifford knelt beside Dylan and placed a gentle hand on his back. "Yes," Clifford said softly. "We are." Dylan smiled, a small, quiet smile that carried more meaning than words. Then he reached out and grabbed Clifford's hand with one small hand and Brianna's with the other. "Good," he whispered. Brianna felt tears slip from her eyes. Clifford felt his heart swell with something powerful, something like purpose, something like belonging. And there they stood, hand in hand, side by side, all three connected in a moment that sealed their future, not with grand gestures, but with a child's simple truth. Before we close this chapter, if this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and drop a comment. It helps more people discover stories filled with hope and healing. And if you're new to Mr. Michael Stories, we'd love to have you join the family, so hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications. Brianna and Clifford walked back toward the park entrance, their steps aligning naturally. Dylan swung their arms playfully, humming to himself. The night air felt different, lighter, fuller, filled with the quiet hum of new beginnings. Clifford looked at Brianna, his voice soft. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Brianna squeezed his hand gently. "Together," she repeated. As they exited the park, the last light of the sunset dipped below the horizon, closing one chapter and illuminating the first page of the next. A story not built on perfection, but on second chances, on truth, on forgiveness, on love that returned when neither expected it. A story of a mother who never gave up, a father who fought to become the man he should have been, and a child who brought them back together simply by loving them both. A family, rebuilt from the pieces of yesterday, shaped by the choices of today, and strengthened for tomorrow. And sometimes, the greatest miracles happen in the moments we feared the most.